The wicked Feintise was very anxious to know the result of her advice, and when she heard that Cheri had already set out, she was delighted, and reported to the Queen Mother all that had passed. "I admit, madam," said she, "that I can no longer doubt that they are the same 4 children, but one of the princes is already gone to seek the dancing water, and will no doubt perish in the attempt, and I shall find similar means to do away with all of them." The plan she had adopted with regard to Prince Cheri was one of the most certain, for the dancing water was not easily to be obtained. It was so notorious from the misfortunes which occurred to all who sought it, that every one knew the road to it. He was 8 days without taking any repose but in the woods. At the end of this period, he began to suffer very much from the heat, but it was not the heat of the sun, and he did not know the cause of it, until from the top of a mountain he perceived the luminous forest. All the trees were burning without being consumed, and casting out flames to such a distance that the country around was a dry desert. At this terrible scene he descended, and more than once gave himself up for lost. As he approached this great fire he was ready to die with thirst, and perceiving a spring falling into a marble basin, he alighted from his horse, approached it, and stooped to take up some water in the little golden vase which he had brought with him, when he saw a turtle-dove drowning in the fountain. Cheri took pity on it, and saved it. "My lord Cheri," she said, "I am not ungrateful. I can guide you to the dancing water, which, without me, you could never obtain, as it rises in the middle of the forest, and can only be reached by going underground." The dove then flew away, and summoned a number of foxes, badgers, moles, snails, ants, and all sorts of creatures that burrow in the earth. Cheri got off his horse at the entrance of the subterranean passage they made for him, and groped his way after the kind dove, which safely conducted him to the fountain. The prince filled his golden vase, and returned the same way he came. He found Belle Etoile sorrowfully seated under some trees, but when she saw him she was so pleased that she scarcely knew how to welcome him. Old Feintise learned from her spies that Cheri had returned, and that the princess, having washed her face with the dancing water, had become more lovely than ever. Finding this, she lost no time in artfully making the princess sigh for the wonderful singing apple. Prince Cheri again found her unhappy, and again found out the cause, and once more set out on his white horse, leaving a letter for Belle Etoile. In the meantime the king did not forget the lovely children, and reproached them for never going to the palace. They excused themselves by saying that their brother's absence prevented them. Prince Cheri at break of day perceived a handsome young man, from whom he learned where the singing apple was to be found, but after traveling some time without seeing any sign of it, he saw a poor turtle-dove fall at his feet, almost dead. He took pity on it, and restored it, when it said, "Good day, handsome Cheri. You are destined to save my life, and I to do you signal service. You are come to seek for the singing apple. It is guarded by a terrible dragon." The dove then led him to a place where he found a suit of armor, all of glass, and by her advice he put it on, and boldly went to meet the dragon. The 2-headed monster came bounding along, fire issuing from his throat, but when he saw his alarming figure multiplied in the prince's mirrors, he was frightened in his turn. He stopped, and looking fiercely at the prince, apparently laden with dragons, he took flight and threw himself into a deep chasm. The prince then found the tree, which was surrounded with human bones, and breaking off an apple prepared to return to the princess. She had never slept during his absence, and ran to meet him eagerly. When the wicked Feintise heard the sweet singing of the apple, her grief was excessive, for instead of doing harm to these lovely children, she only did them good by her perfidious counsels. She allowed some days to pass without showing herself, and then once more made the princess unhappy by saying that the dancing water and the singing apple were useless without the little green bird that tells everything. Cheri again set out, and after some trouble learnt that this bird was to be found on the top of a frightful rock in a frozen climate. At length, at dawn of day, he perceived the rock, which was very high and very steep, and upon the summit of it was the bird, speaking like an oracle, telling wonderful things. He thought that with a little dexterity it would be easy to catch it, for it seemed very tame. He got off his horse and climbed up very quietly. He was so close to the green bird that he thought he could lay hands on it, when suddenly the rock opened and he fell into a spacious hall and became as motionless as a statue. He could neither stir nor utter a complaint at his deplorable situation. 300 knights who had made the same attempt were in the same state. To look at each other was the only thing permitted them. The time seemed so long to Belle Etoile, and still no signs of her beloved Cheri, that she fell dangerously ill, and in the hopes of curing her, Petit Soleil resolved to seek him. But he too was swallowed up by the rock and fell into the great hall. The first person he saw was Cheri, but he could not speak to him, and Prince Hureau, following soon after, met with the same fate as the other two. When Feintise was aware that the third prince was gone, she was exceedingly delighted at the success of her plan, and when Belle Etoile, inconsolable at finding not one of her brothers return, reproached herself for their loss, and resolved to follow them, she was quite overjoyed. The princess was disguised as a cavalier, but had no other armor than her helmet. She was dreadfully cold as she drew near the rock, but seeing a turtle-dove lying on the snow, she took it up, warmed it, and restored it to life. And the dove reviving, gaily said, "I know you, in spite of your disguise. Follow my advice. When you arrive at the rock, remain at the bottom, and begin to sing the sweetest song you know. The green bird will listen to you. You must then pretend to go to sleep. When it sees me, it will come down to peck me, and at that moment you will be able to seize it." All this fell out as the dove foretold. The green bird begged for liberty. "First," said Belle Etoile, "I wish that thou wouldst restore my 3 brothers to me." "Under my left wing there is a red feather," said the bird. "Pull it out and touch the rock with it." The princess hastened to do as she was instructed. The rock split from the top to the bottom. She entered with a victorious air the hall in which stood the 3 princes with many others. She ran towards Cheri, who did not know her in her helmet and male attire, and could neither speak nor move. The green bird then told the princess she must rub the eyes and mouth of all those she wished to disenchant with the red feather, which good office she did to all. The 3 princes and Belle Etoile hastened to present themselves to the king, and when Belle Etoile showed her treasures, the little green bird told him that the Princes Petit Soleil and Hureau and the Princess Belle Etoile were his children, and that Prince Cheri was his nephew. Queen Blondine, who had mourned for them all these years, embraced them, and the wicked Queen Mother and old Feintise were justly punished. And the king, who thought his nephew Cheri the handsomest man at court, consented to his marriage with Belle Etoile. And lastly, to make everyone happy, the king sent for the corsair and his wife, who gladly came. End of story number 2.